Academica Media. You are listening to Charter School Superstars, bringing you the voices of an education revolution.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here in Orlando, Florida, in the middle of our 7-hour live stream from the Florida Charter School Conference. We are about halfway through it. We're still going strong. I thought I would be quite tired by now, and I'm particularly challenged because the food's starting to come in and I'm starting to smell it, and it's throwing me off my game, but I'm being brought right back into my game because I got a fantastic guest that I'm so happy to be talking to. He's been on Charter School Superstars a number of times. I don't think I've ever actually met you in person before.
This is a first.
This
is nice.
Great.
This is what conferences are all about, right?
Absolutely. So this is Lyman Millard. He is the founding partner of Bloomwell Group. This is a national consulting company, helps charter schools with their strategic challenges and opportunities, specializes in charter school recruitment, teacher enrollment, board leadership, a lot of important challenges that charter schools have. Bloomwell Group is there to take care of them, and happy to finally meet you in person.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Now, I have charter school recruitment on the brain right now because in our last guest, or maybe it's 2 guests ago, we were talking about a pretty mind-blowing statistic about charter school enrollment here in Florida. And it's the fact that during the pandemic, when schools in general have been facing their toughest challenges in recent memory, we saw that charter schools in Florida actually had a 3% growth in enrollment during that period. Parents actually voting with their feet and increasing charter school enrollment during this very difficult time for schools. What do you think has accounted for that?
Well, and that really bucks a national trend. I mean, we did a study on this a few months ago and found that across the country, a dip in public school enrollment, both traditional district and charter school enrollment, of about 3 or 4%. In some communities, we saw dips of like 20% in kindergarten, which was just mind-boggling. So I think the fact that, when you think about the, Florida bucking the trend, it's really kind of a 6 percentage point swing, which is massive when you're talking about the number of kids being served.
Oh, because you're saying they should have gone down 3%.
That's like everybody else is going down 3% and you're going up 3%. I mean, that's a heck of a swing.
We're going to start calling it a 6-point swing because that sounds even better.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly there are schools in the community that are delivering on the promise that they're making to families, and been in enrollment and student recruitment for a long time, and regardless of how slick your materials are and how good your campaign strategy is, 40 to 50% of that enrollment is coming from word of mouth. There's certainly plenty of things that schools can do to optimize that word of mouth. But for the vast majority of schools, if you're delivering on the promise that you're making to families, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell their neighbors, they're going to be your ambassadors in the community. And I think when folks were feeling particularly stressed, the fact that the charter school families were feeling that they were getting more than some of their district counterparts were, speaks volumes. I mean, I saw with my own kids who attend a charter school in Cleveland called the Intergenerational School, the speed and nimbleness with which they pivoted from in-person to we're going to take an extra week in spring break, and then figuring out, because so many of the kids that go to the school that my children attend, like 70% are free reduced lunch. A lot of those families didn't have the technology at home. They didn't have a reliable signal at home. So when the entire state of Ohio went to online learning, the speed at which they pivoted really impressed a lot of families. And I think we saw that in charter school after charter school after charter school of really that caring and understanding that we are a community and that our first and foremost job is to take care of our kids and take care of our families. And we saw at school after school, this sort of, them rolling up their sleeves and doing whatever it takes. If families need meals, we'll get them meals. If families need a Wi-Fi hotspot, we'll partner with, Verizon or T-Mobile to make sure that they get those. We'll buy a bunch of Chromebooks and get them out, whatever it takes. And that's why I love this sector, because that's the charter school ethos. It's, I think that in a lot of other sectors, they're faced with adversity, and so they use those excuses. And we're a no excuses sector for sure.
Absolutely not. No excuses. And that ability to pivot that you spoke of, I think that's probably one of the things that's accounting for that 3% growth in enrollment during the pandemic, or as you called it, the 6% swing, which sounds even cooler, is if I had to like trace it back to one of the things that I think helped Florida charter schools is not just the investment that the state made in charter education going back 20 years, but the investments that the state made in virtual education going back 20 years. Florida was one of the earliest adopters of a statewide virtual education program with Florida Virtual School, virtual charter schools, virtual instruction providers at the state level. And so when it came time to have to pivot every school to charter education or to virtual education in Florida, Florida already had some background in this. And so while it wasn't an easy pivot, it was a pivot where a lot of the infrastructure was already there. A lot of the competencies were already there.
You know, that's a really good point. We were talking last night to a few charter school leaders, and this is something that, you know, coming from Ohio, it wouldn't even occur to me. He said that, you know, we already had a really robust, recovery plan because we have to deal with hurricanes. And we've had plenty of times where, we've had to figure out how we're going to serve families who have been devastated, who have lost everything, where we can't get back into our own building. So for us, is like, you know, we've in effect had, you know, a dry run for this. And so he said it was very easy. We just pulled out that plan that we, you know, it wasn't just a dusty binder sitting on the top shelf. It was something that they looked at and reassessed every year. So he felt like they were just in, you know, they really didn't skip a beat.
Now, when we talk about the effect that the pandemic had on charter schools, and for a lot of the schools that did have struggles with recruitment, one of the reasons why that's often the case is that you can't reach out to parents the same way anymore. You have to change your recruitment strategies. And I know a big part of the work that you do at Bloomwell Group was counseling schools through pivoting their recruitment strategies, trying to find ways to continue communicating with prospective parents and students when you can't just meet them face to face anymore. Can you talk a little bit about your work in this area?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of our work really stems from the kids and from the families, and that's sort of who we try to center in just my own company's mission and vision, but also the way in which we build our strategies is really starting with your families and building from the inside out. That's where you're going to develop the strategies that are sustainable, that you can implement year after year and grow year after year. So first and foremost, making sure that that those really strong family connections were being maintained, even if you didn't have the opportunity to see your kids in person once every day. And so helping them make sure that those connections are being maintained, helping make sure that really strong family communication is happening throughout, and then taking that and optimizing it to where then when you do employ some of those digital strategies that can be so effective, and especially in a very targeted way, you're taking these strong family connections and really energizing them. So if you have building out a strong social media network with your current families, so that when you go to do advertising, it's significantly more effective and it's significantly less expensive. So you're getting a lot more bang for your buck because you built that really strong network. The other thing we saw is I think COVID accelerated a lot of trends that were happening anyway. And so one of those trends that we had seen before the pandemic was really folks realizing that the era of spray and pray, where you throw a bunch of marketing out there and hope that
billboards need lots of billboards.
That you throw a bunch of marketing out there and hope that something works, but at the end of the day, you have no idea what did and what didn't, to a much more targeted approach where we're actually getting with some amazing marketing data where we can pull on families, and you can do demographics, and you can do targeted by income, by certainly by geography. Really, like understanding who your target market is, and then pulling a list of those families, and really designing kind of a web of connections with those families. So, with mailings and with phone calls and with digital marketing and with direct outreach. And as things opened up a little bit more, we saw a lot of folks going back to knocking on doors, but in this very targeted way. So it's the same family that's getting 5 or 6 or 7 forms of outreach.
So data is playing a bigger role than it ever has in
Huge.
recruitment. It's not just
Huge.
put up a billboard and hope somebody sees it.
Right.
You're trying to find the people that are going to be receptive to the message, and making sure that you're communicating to them.
Yeah. So really understanding who the people that you're serving, and then who are more people that look and look like, that act like, that live in those same communities, and then taking that a really, really sharp, honed message, a disciplined message. Not, so many times you see a charter school postcard or flyer that has a laundry list of the features. Like, there's a time and place for that, and it's at your parent info session. It's not on the postcard. It's really about understanding what is the decision-making journey that a prospective family is going to go on, and what information they need at each step in that journey.
Well, that's an interesting perspective with these mailers and postcards. If you're saying that the postcard, that initial communication, shouldn't be a laundry list of all the things the school has to offer, what should be on that first communication?
I think it's really the promise that you are making to families. You really need to understand the hopes and the dreams of the people that you're talking to, and show how your school is going to fulfill those hopes and dreams.
So getting right to, I'm going to get this concept wrong because it goes back to my old days as a business student, but talking about that you're not selling features or products, you're selling a solution.
That's right.
So what you're saying is, don't communicate the features in that first thing. That's what the parent meeting's for. Communicate the solution. What do parents want? They don't want a particular class or program necessarily. They want to know, that the students' fundamental education goals are going to be met, that their students are going to be on the right path to success. And that is what needs to be communicated. And then you can show them the how later.
Absolutely. And really, the purpose of the postcard is to get them to hit the website. The purpose of the website is to get them to sign up for the info session. The purpose of the info session is to get them to apply. So understanding that journey.
What do you marketing guys call that? Funneling,
the
right?
funnel.
That's
absolutely.
Right.
And it's really, families are going to go on this decision-making journey. So understanding that journey, understanding where families are in that journey and what they need to hear about. The other thing is that a lot of educators, did not get into this work for marketing. And so when we're talking with them, one of the things that I think really helps paint that picture for them is the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And that families, like we have this all the time, where we're working with one of the top rated schools in a community, or one of the top rated schools in the state, and so they're really, rightly so, very proud of those results and want to emphasize those results. What's interesting is they're almost always disappointed that more families aren't beating down the door because they were ranked number 2 in Miami-Dade County. Really, that's sort of like second or really actually closer to third in terms of what families want. They want,
really.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you. So
emphasizing the ranking, that's not necessarily what the parents are most excited about?
It's not what you lead with. It's an important indicator, right? It's important that you're able to back up your promise, but the promise is about.
I'll tell you, these principals love.
Well, of course.
You get a blue ribbon or a top U.S. News ranking, you want to shout that from the rooftops.
It's the coin of the realm, right? But I understand. But I mean, you think about it. If you're a father, I have 3 kids in a charter school. And what I want first and foremost is that they're safe, and that they are loved, and then finally academics, right? So if they're getting amazing academic results but they're miserable, that's not a school that I'm interested in having my kids.
You don't want a kid that's going to come home at the end of the day sad every day, even if the test scores are good.
That's right. So I think that the messaging, something that we always try to keep in mind is that we start by speaking to the heart, and then we need to work our way up to the head.
Now, speaking of recruitment, I know a big focus of Bloomwell Group. I'll give you a chance to drink some water there. You are giving us so much great insight. one of the other things that Bloomwell Group helps a lot of schools with is not just recruitment on the potential student side, but teacher recruitment. We just had Judy Marty, the president of Doral College, on earlier, who has a really innovative bachelor's in education program. And one of the things that she was talking about was this pretty significant teacher shortage that we have in schools right now that's only been exacerbated by this pandemic. And so I imagine a lot of schools come to you with help on recruiting great teachers. Can you talk a little bit about what your work looks like in this area right now?
Yeah, I mean, so as we've been talking with school leaders and board members over the last couple of days, the challenge, the biggest challenge that keeps coming up time and time again is this teacher shortage. And really, it was a trend. It was interesting. Those of us that have been in the work for a couple of decades remember back when finding young teachers right out of college were pretty easy because the older generation was, holding on to they hit those 30 years of service, 35 years of service. And so in a sense, they were taking up all the jobs. So it was very easy.
As somebody who was trying to become a teacher coming out of college in the early 2000s, I remember this. Yes.
How many job fairs did you go
to? Oh, the job fairs.
And so you had this kind of wave of teachers that were already going to be retiring. And then I think with the pandemic, especially if you've been in for 20, 30 years, if you've vested your state retirement system, making that pivot is really hard. And it's and learning a new technology. If you're an older teacher, you may not be as comfortable. I mean, look, hey, the younger teachers weren't as comfortable on Zoom. And so we'd certainly have seen this across sectors, but in the education sector, an accelerated retirement, right? So that's the great resignation that's happening really around the country, happened in the form of accelerated retirements. And so now you have to be a lot smarter about where these prospective teachers are, and really, really smart about the value and the promise that you're making to those teachers. It's not for them. These are mission-driven people. And honestly, those are the people you want, the mission-driven people. So really speaking to what it is that makes your school special, what it makes it unique, how it is that you are going to support them. And really coming up with that really strong message that's going to differentiate you, but then also understand how to get that message in front of folks. It's not just posting on Indeed, right? It's really sort of taking some of these family outreach strategies that we've developed and applying them into teacher outreach context. And we've done this here in Florida for True North Classical Academy and other schools around the country. My favorite work has been with a consortium of 3 charter schools in Albuquerque. All 3 of them are serving very similar students, but what I loved about them, and this is just so much a charter school leader story, is like they realized that individually they were not going to be able, when it came to finding really talented teachers, even though they're all after the same exact teachers.
Yeah.
They realized that we're going to be able to, if we pooled our resources and we created this organization out of scratch called Teach ABQ, if we pooled our resources, we're going to be able to attract 3 times as many people as we would if each of us were working on our own. And it was an incredibly successful project. I'm really, really looking forward to relaunching that in January.
So for a lot of the small, maybe single school charter networks, you're saying that can be a way to kind of level the playing field and give them a recruitment advantage, is to pool your resources, find similar independent charter schools, form these consortia, and then use your collective resources to boost your recruitment game.
Absolutely. And you don't need a ton of money. You just need to be able to spend it really, really well. And so, being able to, rather than just trying to do it out on your own, to be able to bring in somebody that's done it, dozens and dozens of times all around the country, is actually a way to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. And most folks put this work in their HR team's wheelhouse, and I love HR. They kept me out of trouble for a very long time, and they also, they have such important critical work to do. But what I found is that the best HR people were really, really good at screening, at interviewing, at making sure evaluations were being done effectively. They weren't necessarily the best marketers. It's just a very different skill set. And so it's often helpful to have partner. Just like I have a partner who is much better on the operation side of things than I am. You have to know sort of what your strengths are and where you need to fill in capacity.
I can dig that. I appreciate that. You gave us a lot of great information in an admittedly very short interview. I encourage our viewers to go to bloomwellgroup.com. You can find out more about Lyman Millard's work. We've also done quite a few episodes of Charter School Superstars together where we've talked about a bunch of great subjects in this area. There's a lot to like about this particular guest and his organization, and he's certainly talking about the things that we need to be hearing. And so I appreciate you taking the time to stop by our booth.
That's my pleasure, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I have one more thing before. It just occurred to me. Rich Moreno from Building Hope walked past. He and I were talking at dinner last night, and I was asking him. So Building Hope is an amazing facilities financing organization.
Oh, yeah.
Just really doing fantastic work, and as a nonprofit, so they're really helping in our sector. So I asked him, hey, Rich, what's the biggest challenge you're seeing? And he's like, actually, coming out of pandemic, a lot of schools have this big infusion of cash, and they're too often they're spending it on things that they're sort of making promises for next year, right? If they're spending it on equipment that in 3 years is going to be replaced, they're spending it on salaries, which they're going to have to match after after those federal funds are over. And I was telling him what I've seen is like a lot of smart school leaders are taking that money and using it as an investment to build capacity, to build enrollment, so that when that money goes away, they have the enrollment that is then feeding that budget year after year after year.
That makes a lot of sense because, right, that's temporary money. That's not going to be there forever. So it's really about putting it into something that's not going to be an ongoing expense in the future, but can actually help grow your organization.
That's right. It's investing it.
And so investing in recruitment, marketing, that seems to be a great place to put those resources.
Well, just in terms of building enrollment in whatever capacity, because that enrollment is then going to sustain you year after year after year.
Great insight. Before we let you go, one last question. You know the question. You've been on this program enough times. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
Buildings. High quality buildings for all of our schools.
I like that a lot. Lyman, thank you so much for joining us on our live stream here. Fantastic.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.